Okay, so we just spent 12,000 miles testing 3 different oils in the same truck, and what we found is gonna blow your mind. Seriously, one of these oils wore the engine down 42% less than the recommended oil. 42%! By the end of this, you're gonna know exactly which oil to run, and trust me, it's probably not what you think. But here's the thing, before I tell you which one won, you gotta understand why we even did this test. Because what the manufacturers tell you? Yeah, that's not the whole story. Alright, so here's how this started. I'm sitting in my buddy Jake's garage, he's a mechanic, right? And we're arguing about oil. I'm saying, dude, the manual says 5W-30, that's what I'm running. He's like, man, you're towing in Arizona heat, you need thicker oil. I'm like, but Ford says 5W-30 for all conditions. And he just laughs at me. So we made a bet. We're gonna test this properly. Not just theory, not just what some engineer in Detroit says, actual testing. Same truck, same driving, 3 different oils. We got a 2019 F-150 with the 3.5 EcoBoost, probably the most common truck engine in America right now. And we're gonna run 0W-20, the thin stuff, 5W-30, what Ford says to use, and 5W-40, the thick stuff Jake swears by. 12,000 miles total, 4,000 miles on each oil. We drove it everywhere. Minnesota in winter when it's 15 degrees, Arizona in summer when it's 105, towing 8,000 pounds up mountain grades, sitting in traffic. We sent oil samples to the lab every single time. We tracked every single gallon of gas. We wrote down everything. And look, I'm not gonna lie, I thought Ford was right. I thought 5W-30 would be the winner. But after seeing the data, man, I was wrong. Real wrong. Let me show you what happened. 0W-20, the thin oil experiment. Okay, so first up, we ran 0W-20. This is the skinny stuff, right? The oil a lot of new cars are running now because, and here's the secret, it helps manufacturers hit their fuel economy numbers. Better MPG on the sticker means they don't get hit with government penalties. And I'll tell you what, that fuel economy thing, it's real. We averaged 20 mpg with the 0W-20. That's almost a full mile per gallon better than the 5W-30 and over a gallon better than the 5W-40. If you're doing the math, that's like 4% better fuel economy. For a fleet operator running 50 trucks, that's real money. Cold starts were insane. We're in Minnesota, it's 15 degrees outside. I turn the key and boom, oil pressure's up in like 2 seconds flat. The thin oil just flows instantly. You can hear the difference. The engine sounds happier, spins easier, everything's smoother. But here's where it gets interesting. After 4,000 miles, we pulled an oil sample and sent it to Blackstone Labs. They test for metal content, basically how much of your engine is dissolving into the oil. And the numbers came back kind of concerning. Iron, that's your cylinder walls, your crankshaft, was at 31 parts per million. Now, if you don't know oil analysis, that doesn't mean much. But Jake looks at the report and goes, dude, that's high. Aluminum was 8 parts per million, copper was 12. For comparison, on this engine with normal use, iron should be in the teens, not the 30s. What's happening is the oil is too thin. Under the pressure of that turbo and the combustion pressure, it's not maintaining a thick enough film between metal parts. So you're getting microscopic metal-to-metal contact. Not enough to feel, not enough to hurt anything short-term, but over 100,000 miles? That adds up to real wear. And then there's the oil consumption. Over 4,000 miles, the truck burned through 1.2 quarts. That's a quart every 3,300 miles. Not terrible, but definitely more than it should be. The thin oil is sneaking past the piston rings and getting burned in the combustion chamber. The real eye-opener was towing in Arizona. We hooked up an 8,000-pound trailer, headed up to Flagstaff. It's all uphill, and the oil temperature gauge is climbing, 248 degrees Fahrenheit. Jake's watching the scanner and he's like, man, we're running hot. At those temps, 0W-20 is really thin, like barely there thin. We actually saw oil pressure dip a bit during hard pulls. So bottom line on 0W-20, great for fuel economy, great for cold starts, but if you're working the engine hard or you're in hot climates, it's not protecting like you need it to. 5W-30, what Ford recommends. All right, next up is 5W-30, the Goldilocks oil. This is what every manufacturer recommends for basically every engine. Why? Because it works okay everywhere without being great anywhere. It's the compromise. Fuel economy dropped to 19.2 miles per gallon, so we lost about 0.8 miles per gallon compared to the 0W-20. Is that a big deal? Depends. Over a year, that's maybe 50 bucks more in gas. For most people, that's nothing. Cold starts in Minnesota were still good. Oil pressure came up in about 3 seconds. Not quite as instant as 0W-20, but honestly, you wouldn't notice the difference unless you were looking at gauges. Here's where it gets better though, the wear numbers. We send the oil sample to the lab after 4,000 miles, and iron's at 22 parts per million. That's 29% lower than the 0W-20. Aluminum's at 6, copper's at 9. The thicker oil is doing a better job protecting protecting things. Oil consumption dropped too. 0.7 quarts over 4,000 miles. That's 1 quart every 5,700 miles. Way better than the 0W-20 and actually pretty normal for a modern turbo engine. When we're towing in Arizona, oil temps hit 236 degrees. That's 12 degrees cooler than the 0W-20. The thicker oil is handling the heat better, staying thicker under stress, maintaining pressure. Oil pressure was rock solid the whole time. Cold mornings, it's at 45 psi at idle. Hot afternoons after sitting in traffic, it's still at 18 psi at idle. Under load, it's hanging between 35 and 55 depending on RPMs. Everything's right where it should be. So like, this is why Ford specifies 5W-30. It works. It's not amazing at anything, but it doesn't suck at anything either. If you live somewhere moderate, if you do normal driving, if you're not beating on your truck, 5W-30 is fine. It's the safe choice. But here's the thing, and this is what Jake kept telling me. Fine isn't the same as optimal. Keep watching. 5W-40, the thick stuff. Now we get to Jake's favorite, the 5W-40. This is the oil he runs in everything. And I'm gonna be honest, I was skeptical. I'm like, dude, Ford didn't engineer this truck for 5W-40. You're gonna hurt fuel economy. It's gonna be too thick in winter. I had all the arguments ready. First thing I notice, fuel economy takes a hit. 18.7 mpg. So we're down 0.5 from the 5W-30 and down a full mile and a third from the 0W-20. Over a year of driving, that's maybe $75 more in gas. Not nothing, but also not huge. Cold starts in Minnesota. Okay, this was the one thing I was really worried about. 15 degrees outside, thick oil. I'm thinking the engine's gonna crank slow. Oil pressure's gonna take forever. I turn the key and it's fine. Takes about 4 or 5 seconds for oil pressure to stabilize. Noticeably longer than 5W-30, but we're talking an extra second or two. Not a big deal. But then, and this is where it gets good, we get the oil analysis back. Iron is at 13 parts per million. 13! That's 58% lower than the 0W-20 and 41% lower than the 5W-30. Aluminum's at 4, copper's at 6. These are the lowest wear numbers we saw in the entire test. Jake's sitting there with the biggest "I told you so" grin on his face, and I can't even argue because the data's right there. The thicker oil is just protecting better. It's maintaining that film between metal parts even under crazy pressure and heat. Oil consumption? 0.3 quarts over 4,000 miles. That's 1 quart every 13,000 miles. Basically nothing. The thick oil is staying in the crankcase instead of burning. Here's the real kicker though. Towing in Arizona heat. We hook up the trailer, same route, same conditions. Oil temp hits 228 degrees. That's 20 degrees cooler than the 0W-20 and 8 degrees cooler than the 5W-30. The thick oil is handling heat way better. Oil pressure's up across the board. Cold idle is 52 psi. Hot idle is 22. Under load, we're seeing 42 to 62 psi. Everything's running higher pressure because the oil's thicker, which means better protection. And here's something Jake pointed out that I didn't think about. Higher oil pressure means oil is getting everywhere faster. It's filling galleries quicker. It's lubricating the turbo bearings better. It's doing everything more aggressively. So now I'm sitting here looking at the data and I'm like, okay, Jake was right. The 5W-40 is clearly protecting the engine better. But there's a catch, right? There's always a catch. The catch. Cold weather. So we're in Minnesota one morning. It's -10. Yeah, negative. And Jake's like, start the truck with the 5W-40. I turn the key and the engine cranks slow. Like noticeably slow. It starts, but it's working harder. And Jake says, see, this is the trade-off. In extreme cold, thick oil is harder to pump. The engine has to work harder to spin, the starter's under more load, and it takes longer to get oil flowing everywhere. He pulls out his laptop and shows me data from Alaska Mechanics. In -20-degree weather, 5W-40 can be too thick. Engines struggle to start, starters fail from the extra load, and upper valve train components don't get oil fast enough during those first few seconds. But here's the thing, how often are you starting your engine in -20-degree weather? If you're in Alaska, okay, that's a real concern. But if you're in Texas, Arizona, even most of the Midwest doesn't hit -20 regularly. And even in Minnesota, we're talking about maybe 10-15 days a year where it's cold enough to matter. The other 350 days, the 5W-40 is protecting better. So this is where it gets interesting. There's no single best oil. It depends on where you are and what you're doing. The real answer, match oil to conditions. Alright, so after 12,000 miles and a pile of data, here's what we figured out. And this is gonna change how you think about oil. If you're in a hot climate, I'm talking Arizona, Texas, Nevada, anywhere that regularly sees over 100 degrees in summer, run thicker oil than the manufacturer says. If they say 5W-30, run 5W-40. The extra protection is worth the tiny fuel economy hit. If you tow heavy or work your truck hard, same thing, thicker oil. Our data showed that under load, thick oil stays thick and keeps protecting. Thin oil gets too thin and you're gonna wear things out. If you're in a cold climate with brutal winters, Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, Alaska, you need that zero weight cold number. 0W-20, 0W-30, 0W-40. That zero means it flows instantly, even when it's stupid cold outside. But you can still run a thicker hot number for protection. If you just commute in moderate weather and don't work the engine hard, honestly, run what the manufacturer says. The 5W-30 in our test did fine for normal use. It's when you get into extremes that it matters. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Car companies spec oil based on CAFE fuel economy requirements. They need to hit certain MPG numbers or they get fined by the government. So they spec the thinnest oil that won't cause warranty failures during the warranty period. Notice I said during the warranty period. They're not thinking about 200,000 miles. They're thinking about 60,000 miles and the powertrain warranty. Jake explained it to me like this. Ford doesn't care if your engine wears out at 150,000 miles instead of 250,000. You're out of warranty. But if they can get 0.3 better MPG across their entire fleet by speccing 5W-30 instead of 5W-40, that saves them millions in government penalties. And suddenly it all clicked. The manufacturer spec is about fuel economy and meeting regulations first, longevity second. What we're actually running now. So after all this testing, you want to know what we're running? Jake's in Phoenix, Arizona. Hot climate, he tows regularly. He's running 5W-40 year-round. Fuel economy's a bit worse, but his engines last forever. I'm in Colorado. We get cold winters but hot summers, and I tow occasionally. I'm running 5W-30 in winter, 5W-40 in summer. Yeah, I change oil viscosity with the seasons. Takes an extra 5 minutes to buy the right oil, but the engine protection is worth it. My cousin's in Minnesota. Brutal winters, moderate summers. He's running 0W-30 year-round. Good cold flow, decent hot protection, best of both worlds for his climate. Here's what's crazy. We're all running the same model truck, same engine, but different oil based on where we live and what we do. And every single one of us is doing it different than what Ford recommends. The oil brand thing. Oh, and here's something else we figured out. Brand matters way less than viscosity. We ran Mobile 1 for all 3 tests because we wanted to isolate viscosity as the variable. But we also tested cheap synthetic versus expensive synthetic of the same viscosity. The difference between good synthetic and great synthetic in the same viscosity? Maybe 15 to 20% on wear metals. Not nothing, but not huge. The difference between 0W-20 and 5W-40? 58%. Massive. So if you're trying to decide between expensive 0W-20 and cheap 5W-30, buy the cheap 5W-30. The viscosity difference matters more than the brand difference. Obviously, don't run absolute garbage oil, but you also don't need to spend $8 a quart on boutique racing oil for your daily driver. Good quality synthetic in the right viscosity beats expensive synthetic in the wrong viscosity every time. Change intervals matter more than you think. Here's another thing. How often you change oil matters as much as what oil you use. We were changing every 4,000 miles for the test, which is pretty frequent, and even the 0W-20 did okay at 4,000 miles. But if you're running 10,000 mile oil changes like a lot of manufacturers recommend, thin oil is gonna break down harder. By 10,000 miles, 0W-20 is cooked, especially if you're doing any towing or hard use. Jake showed me oil analysis from a customer who ran 0W-20 for 10,000 miles with regular towing. The oil was black, the wear metals were through the roof, and the oil had basically turned into thin soup. It wasn't protecting anything anymore. But 5W-40 at 10,000 miles still had life left, still protecting. The thicker oil with better additives handles extended drains better. So here's the thing. If you're gonna run extended oil changes, run thicker oil. If you're changing every 4,000 miles, you can get away with thinner oil. Personally, I don't trust 10,000 mile changes no matter what oil you're running. I'm changing every 5,000 max. Oil's cheap compared to engines. The fuel economy myth. Let's talk about the fuel economy thing because I know someone's gonna say, but the thin oil gets better MPG. Yeah, it does. We proved it. 0W-20 got 4% better fuel economy than 5W-40. But let's do the actual math. Say you drive 12,000 miles a year. At 19 miles per gallon average and $4 a gallon, you're spending about $2,500 a year on gas. 4% better fuel economy saves you $100 a year. $100. Now what's a turbo replacement cost? 4 grand. What's an engine rebuild cost? 8 grand and up. If running thick oil makes your engine last 50,000 miles longer, you're saving thousands on repairs. Way more than you're spending on gas. This is the thing, people obsess over saving $100 a year on fuel economy, but then face a $4,000 turbo replacement at 90,000 miles because they ran oil that was too thin. It's penny wise and pound foolish, as my grandpa used to say. What about your specific car? Alright, so you're probably wondering, okay, but what about my car? Here's the quick guide. Got a Honda or Toyota that specs 0W-20? If you're in Oregon or Washington, normal commuting, mostly highway, you're probably fine running what they say. But Phoenix, Tucson, Vegas, anywhere hitting 100 degrees regularly? Bump to 5W-30 minimum. Your oil temp's gonna be 20 degrees hotter than Toyota planned for. And if you're towing anything, 5W-30 minimum, probably 5W-40. Got a truck that specs 5W-30? If you're using your truck like an actual truck, towing, hauling, working it hard, you need 5W-40, period. Brutal cold winters? Maybe 0W-30 for instant flow plus decent hot protection. But if you bought a truck and never haul anything, 5W-30's fine, but why not run 5W-40 anyway? $50 a year difference for way better protection. Got a performance car? Mustang, Camaro, Challenger, anything making serious power? Run thicker than spec. Your Mustang GT making 400 horsepower creates insane cylinder pressure. Ford might spec 5W-30 for fuel economy, but if you're using the power, you need 5W-40 minimum. Some guys run 5W-50 for track days, and change it every 3 to 4,000 miles. Got a high mileage vehicle? Over 150,000 miles? Bearings wear, clearances get bigger, rings have more gap. Thicker oil compensates. If it originally spec'd 5W-20, bump to 5W-30 after 150,000. Jake's got a customer with a Camry at 280,000 miles. Started on 0W-20, now runs 5W-30, still going strong. Got a German car? BMW, Mercedes, Audi? They already spec thick oil, usually 0W-40 or 5W-40. Just run what they say. Germans engineer for longevity, not fuel economy. They know their engines run hot and need protection. Only exception, extreme cold. Maybe run 0W-40 instead of 5W-40. The key is your specific situation. Where do you live? How do you drive? Pick oil accordingly. So look, after 12,000 miles and way too much money spent on oil analysis, here's what I learned. There's no one perfect oil for everyone. The winner depends completely on where you live and what you do with your vehicle. But if I had to give general advice, run thicker than the manufacturer specs. The fuel economy hit is tiny, the protection benefit is massive, and engines are expensive. 5W-40 produced 42% less engine wear than 0W-20 in our testing. 42%! Over the life of an engine? That's the difference between making it to 300,000 miles or needing a rebuild at 200,000. And here's the thing, Jake was right all along. Mechanics see the long-term effects of these choices. They're tearing down engines and seeing what works and what doesn't. When a mechanic tells you to run thicker oil, there's a reason. So yeah, I lost the bet. I owe Jake a case of beer. But I learned something important, and hopefully you did too. Run the right oil for your situation. Don't just blindly follow the manual. Think about your climate, think about how you use your vehicle, and make an informed choice. Your engine will last longer, and honestly, isn't that worth $100 a year in fuel economy? Alright, if this changed how you think about oil, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you're running and where you are. I'm curious to see if you guys are doing the same thing we figured out. Subscribe because we're gonna keep testing stuff like this. Real world testing, real data, no BS. Next up, we're testing synthetic versus conventional in extreme conditions. And trust me, you're gonna wanna see that. Thanks for watching. Now go change your oil to something that actually protects your engine. Your future self will thank you.